I was closing my laptop when the call came. My mother's voice was upbeat, unnaturally so. "Claire, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow. Oh, and the lake house and your Jeep sold. Everything's done." I froze. The lake house where Dad taught me how to fish. The Jeep we rebuilt together. Gone. Just like that. No discussion, no permission, just vanished. But what she didn't know was this I had prepared for this day. I had a second phone, a sealed envelope, and a plan. If she thought she erased me, she forgot one thing Dad taught me how to fight without shouting. The hum of espresso machines and the low murmur of conversations wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. I was halfway through replying to a client email, the cursor blinking patiently, when my phone buzzed beside my coffee cup. Mum flashed across the screen. I stared at it for a second, just long enough to consider letting it go to voicemail. But something in my gut, maybe the fact she rarely called unless it was about money or drama, nudged me to answer. I tapped accept and brought the phone to my ear. "Claire?" she said, her voice bright, unnaturally cheerful. "Guess what? Rick and I are heading to Europe tomorrow. Isn't that exciting?" I blinked. "What? Oh, right. Almost forgot." "Well, not forgot." She chuckled, airy and dismissive. "Just didn't want to make a big deal of it. Anyway, we sold the lake house and your Jeep. Everything's finalised. We needed the money fast, and it's not like you were using either of them. The funds are already wired." Her voice breezed on like she was talking about cleaning out an old closet, not erasing the last remnants of my father's memory or mine. "We're off tomorrow afternoon. I'll send pictures. Love you." And then she hung up. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, blinking at the empty screen like it might offer an explanation. Behind me, the barista called out someone's latte. A spoon clinked against ceramic. The world carried on. But something inside me had fractured. She said we. She didn't mean her and me. She meant her and Rick. The lake house had been in our family for 3 generations. My father built the dock with his own hands. That summer I was 10, covered in mosquito bites, holding his tools like they were treasure. The Jeep wasn't just a car, it was a summer project we'd tackled together, sanding rust and swapping parts in the driveway while music played through old garage speakers. Gone. Both gone. With a single call like they were clearance items on a yard sale table. I closed my laptop slowly. Not in anger, not even in shock. Just deliberate. I had known this day would come, maybe not like this, but I'd felt it brewing for years, each time Mom looked past me, each time she prioritized a man or a whim over something real. I took a final sip of my lukewarm coffee and slid my hand into the side pocket of my tote. My fingers found the small burner phone, black, cheap, unremarkable. The kind you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. I hadn't used it in over a year. But it had one contact. I stepped outside into the buzz of the city traffic, thick and unmoved by my quiet apocalypse. I dialed. One ring. Mason, a voice answered, calm and clipped. "She did it," I said, my voice low. "She sold the house and the Jeep." A pause. Papers rustled in the background. Understood. Do we proceed? I stared across the street where 2 kids were playing tag between sidewalk planters. So innocent, so unaware of the kind of betrayal that didn't leave bruises, only absences. "Yes," I said, quietly. "I'll start with the deed records. Call you back in an hour." I hung up and tucked the phone away. Around me, people laughed, sipped coffee, checked their watches. No one noticed that someone had just tried to erase me. But she had forgotten one thing. My father didn't just teach me how to rebuild a car or tie fishing knots. He taught me how to prepare without noise, how to defend what was mine without shouting, and most importantly, how to see people clearly, especially the ones who wore smiles while they sharpened knives behind your back. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked to the lake. The edge of the city faded behind me as I followed the trail past the birches and toward the small dock Dad used to love. I sat on a bench, weathered by time and memory, letting the silence settle. It had been over 3 years since he died. A sudden heart attack, they said. 1 minute he was replacing brake pads in the garage, the next minute gone. No warning, no goodbye. But there had been something. The last time I saw him, we were sitting on the porch of the lake house sipping coffee as the fog drifted lazily over the water. I'd driven up from Chapel Hill that weekend, one of the rare moments when life paused long enough for us to just be together. He was quiet that morning, pensive, in a way I hadn't questioned at the time. "I've been thinking," he said, setting his mug down. "Sometimes people don't show you who they are until it costs you something." I remember frowning, unsure what he meant. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, plain unsealed with my name scrawled across the front in his careful handwriting. "Don't open it unless something happens," he said, "and only when you feel it's time." I didn't ask questions. I just nodded and tucked it away, assuming it was a sentimental letter or a few old photos. Something to remember him by. I'd kept it hidden for over 3 years, moving it from drawer to drawer as life shifted around me. But I'd never opened it, not until now. That night I placed the envelope on my kitchen table. My hands were steady, but my chest throbbed with something heavy sharp, a grief that had never fully healed. I slid my thumb under the seal and peeled it open. Inside were 5 neatly folded documents, no note, no explanation, just cold, hard proof of something he must have seen coming. The first was a notarized transfer deed granting full ownership of the lake house to a limited liability company, Dawson Shore Holdings, established 2 years before his death, with me listed as the sole managing member. The second document was for the Jeep, same process, transferred legally into the LLC, registered under my name. The next 2 shocked me. They were deeds for 2 duplex rental properties in Chapel Hill addresses I didn't recognise, both registered under the same LLC. The paperwork was clean, properly filed, dated, witnessed. I scanned through them slowly, a chill creeping into my spine. The 5th document was a certificate of organisation for the LLC itself, my name. My address, my father's signature, his accountant's stamp. Every page screamed intention. This wasn't an afterthought, this was strategy. He'd known, maybe not the details, maybe not the when or the how, but somewhere inside him he'd understood that Elaine might try to take what didn't belong to her, and he'd acted quietly, preemptively, to protect me. A whisper of tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. Then I noticed something else. One of the Chapel Hill addresses had a tenant listed on the lease standard language, except for the name, J. Monroe. I didn't know anyone by that name. There was no mention of it in any of Dad's records. And when I searched the name on my laptop, nothing came up. A small, hollow thread of unease tugged at me. Was it just a placeholder name, a legal alias, or something deeper I didn't know yet? But it didn't matter. What mattered was this: I wasn't powerless, I wasn't erased. She could sell stories and invent truths. But legally, nothing she'd done held weight. I had proof, I had leverage, and I had time. This wasn't just about the lake house or the Jeep. This was about reclaiming everything that had been quietly taken from me. Not with rage, with resolve. Mason's office was tucked inside an old mill building that had been converted into a row of sleek, professional suites, exposed brick steel beams, minimal decor. The kind of place that screamed quiet power. I buzzed the intercom and the door unlocked with a click. He opened it himself in a dark sweater and glasses perched low on his nose, holding a mug that said, "Trust the process." "Claire," he greeted, stepping aside. "Come in." I handed him the manila folder with all the documents from my father's envelope. No small talk, no catching up, just action. He flipped through them, his brow lifting as each page revealed another layer of preemptive genius. "Your father," he muttered, almost in awe. He really planned for this. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. He moved to his desk, pulling up a county records portal on his computer. "I want to check who she sold the house and vehicle to," he said. "If they were actual buyers or part of something else." I nodded, sitting across from him, watching the screen reflect in his glasses. He typed quickly, muttering as he navigated databases and cross-referenced documents. "Here we go," he said, finally narrowing his eyes. "Deed transfer recorded last week. Buyer name Cass Vale." I blinked. "Of course. Cass," I repeated. "You know her." "We were roommates freshman year," I said slowly. "Lost touch after graduation." He turned in his chair, watching me. "Coincidence?" "No," I said. "Not at all. 2 years ago, after my father's funeral, I had one long wine-fueled phone call with Cass. At the time, she was working in real estate, quiet deals, off-market properties, LLC transfers. I'd called her not because I needed to sell anything, but because I wanted a contingency, just in case. I never told her the full story about my mother, but I'd hinted, and she'd agreed to help if things ever went sideways. We set up a legal structure where she could act as a front buyer for the house or the Jeep should any unauthorized attempt be made. She would buy it, hold it, and keep everything under wraps until I could reverse it. I didn't expect to need it so soon. She played her role, Mason said, brilliantly. No liens, no exposure, just a clean transfer back to the LLC once we file. I nodded, feeling both relief and the bitter edge of betrayal twist in my chest again. "She didn't even hesitate," I said. "Didn't even think I might still care. She probably assumed you'd never know," Mason said. "She always assumes that." He looked at me carefully, then reached for his notes. "Let's document everything," he said. "We'll start with the fraudulent sale, then move to the LLC restoration. We can file a petition with the county recorder by the end of the week." I nodded again. Efficient, detached. But deep down a part of me ached, because I'd known this day might come, and yet it still stung that my mother had been so quick to discard what mattered to me. Not just the house, not just the Jeep, but the memory of my father that lived in them. The moments, the sweat, the laughter echoing off the lake. Gone traded for a vacation selfie and a temporary high with a man who barely remembered her birthday. I inhaled slowly. At least now I had something solid, not vengeance, not even justice, but control. And that I realized was more powerful than either. Over the next few days, Mason and I moved quickly. Paperwork flew between us like tactical weapons, every document, every file a shield to restore what had been taken. He drafted reversal filings for both the house and the Jeep, attaching the LLC ownership proof from my father's estate. The language was sharp, surgical, designed not to leave room for argument. But while Mason worked on the legal strategy, I dove into the files deeper. I wanted to understand everything, every detail my father had hidden in that envelope, every clause he included, every name mentioned. That's when I saw it. A line buried in the 3rd page of the Trust's supplementary documentation, an attempted access request, 2 years ago, same month my father passed, filed under the name Claire Dawson. But the signature wasn't mine. I froze, staring at the scanned form. It wasn't just forged, it was sloppy. The loop in the D curved wrong, the C in Claire was too large, but it was enough to trigger a manual review at the bank, and ultimately a denial. They had flagged it as suspicious and blocked access, quietly, without notifying anyone. Probably out of respect for the Trust's protective clauses, but the name attached to the login request, the device ID, it matched an old desktop computer registered under Elaine's account. My mother had tried to take the trust money before the ink on my father's death certificate had dried, and she'd failed. My fingers curled around the edge of the paper. I felt heat rising in my chest, not like a fire, but like pressure deep and slow, the kind that doesn't scream but simmers. I closed the file. I could have reported it. I could have sent everything to the DA's office, filed a formal complaint, dragged her into court for attempted fraud. But I didn't. I didn't want punishment. I wanted consequence, because punishment could be argued, spun, reframed as a misunderstanding or desperation. She'd cry, maybe apologize, maybe even get a lawyer to paint her as grieving and confused. But consequence was real. It didn't knock on the front door, it waited behind it. That night I called Mason and told him about the attempted access. He was quiet for a long beat. "Do you want to escalate this?" he asked finally. "No," I said, "not yet." "Claire, this is big. If it ever came to court, I'm not trying to win a case, Mason. I'm trying to teach a lesson." He sighed but didn't argue. We finalised the asset recovery plan the next morning. Cass had already agreed to return the deed as soon as we filed. The car title transfer was incomplete, making it easy to reverse. Within a week, everything would be back under Vale Holdings LLC. No fanfare, no headlines, just silence, exactly how I wanted it. But inside me, something shifted. Not rage, not even sorrow. Strategy. I printed out the forged document and tucked it into a folder labelled unopened. A reminder. Not of her betrayal, but of my father's foresight. He knew. Maybe he hadn't known exactly what she would do, but he knew what she was capable of. And now, so did I. Elaine's Instagram came alive the next day. A flurry of photos from European cities, Paris, then Venice, then Lisbon. Her hair curled just so, oversized sunglasses perched like a badge of youth. Rick always beside her, one arm casually draped over her shoulder, the other flashing a glass of wine or pointing at a cathedral. The captions were all variations of the same fantasy time for our next chapter, living our best life, letting go of the past. I didn't react, didn't comment, didn't even look too long. The algorithm would notice. Instead, I worked. While she flaunted joy, I dismantled her illusion. Mason filed the reversal paperwork at the county office. By law, the transfer of the house and the Jeep was nullified as neither had been legally authorised. Within 72 hours, the house was reinstated under Vale Holdings LLC. The Jeep never officially changed hands. The transaction was incomplete and easily voided. I located the Jeep. Using its GPS history, Rick had parked it at the long-term lot of Raleigh-Durham International Airport. I arranged for a tow, a detail job, and had it quietly returned to my garage. The accounts she'd accessed, credit lines once shared with Dad, but still linked to the house, were frozen. The shared utility accounts were transferred, the forwarding address updated. Slowly, surgically, I erased every access point she had built for herself in my life. And then, while reviewing the old funeral guest book, looking for anything that might explain the name I'd seen in the trust files, I saw a name that snapped into place like a key clicking home. Rick Halloway. He wasn't just a charming man with a salt and pepper beard and 2 white teeth. He was there. At the funeral. I remembered him now, not in detail, but in presence. Lingering near the coffee station, talking too long to the accountant, asking gentle, curious questions about the estate. I searched his name. Rick Halloway, alias, known associations with multiple investment scams in Florida and South Carolina, had been investigated but never charged in a 2014 case involving elderly financial manipulation. Always slipped away just before the hammer fell. My stomach turned. It wasn't just that Elaine had chosen someone careless. She'd chosen someone calculated. Someone who saw her coming from a mile away and decided she was worth the trouble. I stared at the screen, at the image of Rick holding a passport, like it was a lottery ticket, smiling like he'd already won. Maybe he had, but I wasn't going to let him keep the prize. Not the house, not the Jeep, not the legacy my father built with his own 2 hands. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. One signed form at a time. The Jeep arrived 2 days later, spotless, the leather interior smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old memories. I watched from the window as the delivery driver backed it carefully into the garage, the sun catching the faded scratch on the fender, one Dad and I never bothered to fix. It was still there, exactly how we'd left it. I closed the blinds and returned to my desk where Mason had just sent over the draft of the eviction notice. It was written under the LLC's name, not mine. There was no mention of Claire Dawson. No personal fingerprints. The document was cold, impersonal, legally precise. Exactly what I needed it to be. We agreed it would be served 30 days after Elaine's expected return. Just enough time for her to unpack, feel comfortable, and then realise she no longer belonged. Still I hesitated. Not because I doubted the decision, but because I knew how final it was. Once served, there would be no more pretending, no more dinners or apologies or half-hearted reconciliations. This was a door closing, permanently. That evening, while searching through one of Dad's old filing cabinets for property tax records, I found a folder labelled Personal Loans. I almost skipped it, assuming it was unrelated old debts maybe, or informal notes on rental agreements. But something made me open it. Inside were several handwritten agreements loans Dad had issued over the years. Most were small neighbourly favours, but one caught my eye. A yellowed page stapled twice at the corner dated 29 years ago. Elaine Dawson, loan amount $14,000, purpose custody and relocation arrangement. I stared at the wording hard, thudding. Custody. At the bottom of the page in my father's handwriting were the terms repayable upon full custodial transfer of Claire Dawson, age 9, to primary residence of lender. I sat down hard. It was a contract. My mother had borrowed money from my father, her then ex-husband, with the agreement that he would become my primary guardian once the debt was repaid. It read more like a pawn ticket than a parental decision. And she signed it. Her signature, slanted and flamboyant, was right there next to the date. My breath came shallow. It wasn't just that she'd betrayed me now. She'd done it long before I was old enough to understand. I wasn't just collateral in a financial scam. Now I'd been collateral then. My entire childhood, I'd believed my father had fought for me, that he'd wanted custody and won, that Mom had drifted out of my life because she didn't want to raise a child alone. But this document said otherwise. She'd traded me, not out of love, not out of surrender, but for money. I folded the paper slowly as though it might shatter. My hands trembled, not from anger, from clarity. She had always been this person. I just hadn't let myself see it. Now, the eviction wasn't just about the house. It was about drawing a line between the woman who birthed me and the woman who no longer had the right to be in my story. Elaine had given me away once. This time, I would be the one walking away. It was a Thursday afternoon when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't ordered anything. But there it was, 3 soft taps, spaced like someone who wasn't sure if they wanted to be heard. I opened the door and found Elaine standing there, smaller than I remembered. Her hair pulled back into a limp bun, her designer handbag warped and overstuffed. Her jacket, once crisp and tailored, hung awkwardly wrinkled and wet at the hem. "Claire," she said, voice thin. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly. She walked in like a stranger, like someone touring a museum where the art was familiar, but the context had been erased. Her eyes moved across the room, pausing on the bookshelf, the window ledge, the ceramic teapot I'd bought at a yard sale last spring. She didn't speak again until I handed her a mug of tea. "Rick's gone," she said. "He met someone on a boat tour in Porto. A 23-year-old backpacker from Marseille. Said he needed to find himself." She gave a hollow laugh. "He took what was left of the money and vanished." I didn't respond. "I tried to use our travel points to get back," she continued, "but the account was drained. I had to borrow money from a stranger at the airport to call the airline. Still I said nothing. I just sat across from her, watching the steam rise from her tea. She cradled the mug like it might warm more than just her hands. I didn't know where else to go. That was the real sentence, the one hidden beneath the others. I nodded once, slowly. "You can stay," I said, "for a little while." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, her pride clashing with exhaustion. "Thank you, baby. I know I don't deserve it." I didn't argue. She settled into the guest room that night, unpacking slowly, deliberately. She hung her clothes in the closet like she planned to stay longer than she admitted. I let her. For 2 days, she floated around the apartment like a ghost, making tea, washing dishes, folding blankets she didn't unfold. She avoided my eyes when I entered the room, spoke only when spoken to, and offered short, vague updates about her plans. Then one morning, I passed by the hallway and heard her on the phone. "I just need a wire transfer," she said. Her voice was low, rehearsed. "I'll pay you back." It's just temporary, yes, I know, but this is different. I just need a few hundred to hold me over. I paused outside the door, my skin prickling, but something wasn't right. The tone, the cadence, too smooth, too controlled. I stepped away quietly and checked my phone. No signal. That wing of the apartment didn't get reception. You had to be near the window or use Wi-Fi calling. And I hadn't given her the password yet. I returned to the hallway and leaned slightly into the frame of her door. She wasn't on a call. The phone screen was dark. She was performing for me, for herself, I wasn't sure. Practicing a script? Preparing for a request she hadn't made yet. I backed away before she noticed me. Elaine hadn't changed. She had just pivoted. From vacationer to victim. And I was her new audience. Elaine asked if she could stay just for a few weeks. Enough time to figure things out, she said, with a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I agreed, but with quiet boundaries. I didn't say them out loud. I didn't need to. I simply took action. I gave her a temporary key fob that tracked entries and exits. The guest room had no access to the Wi-Fi. I never shared the password. I placed a security camera in the hallway, angled subtly, not hidden but not obvious, just enough to remind her this wasn't her home. I also switched all financial alerts to ping my private phone. Any attempt to use old shared accounts, any activity with the utilities, the trust, or the LLC, all routed to me. She wasn't here as a mother reclaiming space. She was here on borrowed time. At first, Elaine played the role well. She cleaned the kitchen every morning, made tea in the afternoon, and left sticky notes with affirmations on the fridge. Gratitude is a habit, one read. Another healing isn't linear. It was theatrical, too polished. Like a woman staging a version of herself she thought I might forgive. I observed quietly, watched her eyes flicker toward the drawer where I kept my checkbook, noticed how she lingered by my laptop when she thought I wasn't looking. She hadn't asked for money. Yet. Then one evening, as I emptied the kitchen trash, something slipped free from a crumpled paper towel. A torn slip of lined notebook paper folded twice. Curiosity made me open it. Scrawled in her handwriting, distinctive all loops and slashes, were just 6 words. Don't trust the girl for long. There was no context, no name, just that. My stomach dropped. I turned the note over, nothing on the back. I stared at the words until they blurred. Was it a reminder to herself, a draft of something she planned to tell someone, a message for someone else entirely? I didn't know. And that was what twisted the knife, because for a moment, for one fleeting moment, I had almost believed she might be trying, that her tears had been real, that her tired eyes meant something. But now I didn't know if she was rebuilding her life or rehearsing her next deception. I refolded the note and placed it in a drawer alongside the forged bank documents and the custody loan from 30 years ago, a ledger of betrayals, proof not for court, but for clarity. Elaine didn't need punishment. She needed exposure to herself, to the choices that had layered one on top of another until there was nothing left between us but strategy and survival. The audience wouldn't just feel anger, they'd feel uncertainty. They'd wonder, was she always like this? Or did something break her long ago, and was Claire cruel for keeping her under watch? Or simply the only one who finally stopped pretending Elaine announced her new job over breakfast, stirring sugar into her tea like it was a detail barely worth mentioning. It's nights, she said, cleaning offices, nothing glamorous. But it's something. I nodded without looking up from my laptop. Where downtown, she replied too quickly. 2 buildings, both near Main Street. She didn't offer specifics. No company name, no supervisor, no hours. Just the kind of vague scaffolding that could hold a lie without crumbling. I waited until she left that evening, dressed in an old cardigan and a pair of my worn sneakers she hadn't asked to borrow. She took the bus 1 transfer, then downtown. I followed. From a distance, I watched her get off near the courthouse and walk 3 blocks south to a beige office building with a faded sign and a buzzer that stuck when pressed. She rang twice, and someone let her in. An hour passed, then 2. She didn't leave. And when she did, she looked tired, really tired. Not performed exhaustion, but genuine weariness in her shoulders, the way her steps shortened as she reached the bus stop. She clutched a thermos like a talisman, and for a moment I couldn't see the woman who forged documents or whispered warnings in trash bins. Just a woman trying to survive. I followed her again 2 nights later, same routine, same building. But this time something changed. She exited early after only 90 minutes and didn't head to the bus stop. Instead, she walked 2 blocks northeast toward an abandoned parking lot near a storage facility. She stopped near a shadowed car. He stepped out of the driver's seat like a ghost summoned. Rick. Same smug posture, same jacket from the Europe photos. His hair, longer face, rougher but unmistakably him. They didn't embrace, didn't kiss, just talked. Elaine gestured with her hands, quick agitated movements. Rick listened, then handed her something. She tucked it into her bag without hesitation. I moved closer, careful not to be seen, heart pounding in my ears. Then he left. She stood there for another minute before walking back toward the bus line. I stayed in the shadows. What did he give her cash a document? Another lie wrapped in paper I didn't know. But now I understood something else. Elaine hadn't just come back for shelter. She was still tethered to the man who left her behind, still orbiting the destruction they'd built together. Her job might be real, but the narrative she fed me wasn't. It was incomplete, selective, and maybe beneath all of it still manipulative. For the first time in weeks, my resolve hardened again. Because maybe she wasn't pretending this time, but maybe she didn't know how to stop living in the shadows. By the second week, Elaine's shoulders curved more than they used to. The bounce in her voice faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of routine. She no longer bothered with makeup in the mornings or perfect posture in the evenings. Her face, bare and honest, showed new lines I hadn't noticed before. She still worked the night shifts, and she no longer tried to explain what she did or how it went. When she returned, she showered in silence, microwaved leftover lentils, and fell asleep on the couch without asking for permission. For the first time, she wasn't performing, she was enduring. The act so carefully constructed since the day she arrived had crumbled not with a dramatic confession or explosive truth, but through exhaustion. Elaine was tired in her bones, tired in the way people get when they stop holding up masks and start realizing the weight of who they really are. One morning I found her sitting on the porch with a notepad mapping out her hours and expenses. She didn't see me watching from the window. No narration, no sighs meant to be overheard, just quiet math, deliberate lines, and a face that looked like it belonged to someone who had finally accepted the limits of her world. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something else. Uncertainty. Because if this was real, if her collapse wasn't strategy, then what did that make me? I didn't say anything that day. Just left Epsom salts by the bathroom, brewed her tea early, and continued collecting my quiet ledger. But that night, everything shifted. I came home late from a client dinner, letting myself in as quietly as possible. The apartment was dark except for the hallway light. I passed by the living room expecting to find it empty. Instead, I saw her. Elaine was on her knees in front of the bookshelf, one hand resting on the photo of my father, the one of him in his flannel shirt, holding a fish bigger than his grin. Her back was to me, and her shoulders shook. No sound, no gasps, just the soft tremble of someone who wasn't crying for show, but because something inside had finally broken open. She didn't know I was there. She didn't try to be seen. And for the first time since she returned, I believed her tears. I stepped back into the hallway and leaned against the wall, unsure what to feel. I had wanted her to hurt. But this wasn't the kind of hurt you could control. It was old, raw, maybe even real. Part of me recoiled, afraid that if I softened, I'd lose everything I'd built, my distance, my clarity, my control. But another part, buried and trembling, remembered being 9 years old, hiding behind the couch while she sobbed after court, believing her heartbreak was about losing me. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I'd never know. But that night, the graph of my emotions, so carefully kept linear, twisted again. The bitterness dipped, the confusion rose, and a flicker of pity emerged from a place I thought I'd burned down long ago. Elaine never saw me, and I never spoke of it, but something in the air between us changed, not healed, not forgiven, just softened. And for the first time, it scared me more than her lies ever had. I found the USB drive by accident. It was tucked behind an old photo album at the bottom of my desk drawer, inside a small envelope with only my name written on the front. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's neat and deliberate, each letter carefully formed like he was speaking through pen. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at it for a long time before plugging it into my laptop. No videos, no sentimental messages, just folders, dozens of them. Financial records, scanned legal documents, trust fund ledgers, dates, bank names, offshore accounts, a quiet empire I hadn't known existed, and at the centre of it all, Vale Holdings Trust. My name was listed as the sole beneficiary. The documents were airtight, dated 4 years before his death, protected by multiple levels of legal and financial firewalls. My father hadn't just set aside a few properties and a car. He had built an entire financial defence system around me. The rental properties were only a sliver. The real value was in the investments, the structured assets, the slow, deliberate growth he'd orchestrated without telling a soul. I scrolled further and stopped at a folder titled Access Attempts. Curiosity turned my stomach cold. Inside was a digital log, one entry, 2 years ago. Attempted access by Claire Dawson, except it wasn't me. The request had been made from an IP address linked to a public library. The documentation submitted a scanned driver's license and notarized letter were laughable fakes. The signature didn't match. The photo was old, the letterhead was wrong, the bank had denied the request, flagged it as suspicious, and blocked the account from further attempts. I didn't need to guess who it was. Elaine had tried to break into the trust within weeks of my father's death, and she had failed. I leaned back in my chair, the room suddenly too quiet. It wasn't just that she had sold my home and my Jeep. She had aimed deeper, at the one thing she hadn't even known the full value of. She hadn't been mourning when she came back from Europe. She'd been regrouping, waiting, hoping I wouldn't find this. I clicked through the financial summaries, tracing her fingerprints across timelines she thought she'd erased. I saw it now, clearly, her urgency to liquidate the house, the Jeep, the panic in her sudden departure, the strategic return, cloaked in humility. But my father had anticipated her every move, the safeguards, the documentation, the refusal logs. He'd left them not just as legal shields, but as truth, quiet truth. And now I held it, proof of who she was, proof of who he had believed I could become. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just saved the most critical files to an encrypted drive and closed the laptop. The game wasn't over. But the rules had changed. I printed everything that mattered, the summary pages of the trust, the scanned copies of the attempted fraud, the legal designations that named me as the sole manager of Vale Holdings, the account summaries that showed how far my father had gone to protect me. Each document felt like a stitch in a quilt I hadn't realized he'd been sewing all my life. When the last sheet cooled on the printer tray, I sat at the dining table and pulled out a clean page of stationery, the heavy kind he used when he wanted to be taken seriously, and I wrote, not to confront, not to accuse, but to release. I didn't address her by name. I didn't call her Mom. I simply wrote to the truth. I told her what I'd found, not with venom but with precision, that I knew she had tried to access the trust, that I knew the documents were fake, that I knew who she'd always been beneath the charm and the pleading. But then, as I reached the final paragraph, something stopped me. A sentence I hadn't noticed before, buried at the end of the trust's addendum. Clause 8.3, contingent allocation. If at any point Elaine Dawson demonstrates sustained recovery, legal compliance, and character transformation as defined by Clause 8.2, the trust administrator reserves the right to release a support allocation from subaccount B under limited supervision. I blinked. There was a part of the trust, small conditional, that was earmarked for her. A future he had made room for if she ever decided to be someone else. It wasn't much. Just enough to live quietly, honestly. A way out of the cycle if she ever chose to stop spinning. And it was up to me to activate it. He had left it in my hands. The final choice. A mix of breathlessness and sorrow rose in my throat, not because I wanted her to have it, but because he still did. Even after everything, even after the lies and the theft and the cold phone call from Europe, he had still believed there might be a version of Elaine worth saving. And now I had to decide if I believed it too. I didn't write that part in the letter. I just folded the pages, placed them in an unsealed envelope, and left it on the kitchen table beside her tea mug. No note, no introduction, only truth, and a silence she would have to fill herself. When she read it, she would know what I knew, that her mask had cracked, that I had seen everything, that her chance for redemption wasn't in my hands, it was in her own. Whether she would reach for it or let it rot was no longer my responsibility. But for the first time, it wasn't just bitterness that lingered inside me. It was breath, clean, slightly bitter, but honest, like the first wind after a storm. I didn't tell her where we were going. Elaine sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window like she was bracing for bad news. She didn't ask. Maybe she didn't want to know. The road to the lake house curved through thickets of pine, the sunlight slicing through in fractured beams. It had rained that morning, and the air still smelled of wet earth and possibility. As we pulled into the gravel drive, I felt her body tense beside me. She gasped quietly, but not enough to hide it. The house stood exactly as we left it, pale siding intact, porch swing swaying gently in the breeze, curtains drawn. A place frozen in time, untouched by all the chaos she thought she'd unleashed. She opened the car door slowly, like stepping out might break the illusion. I didn't speak. I walked ahead and unlocked the door, letting it swing open with a familiar creak. She stepped inside, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her fingers brushed the doorframe, the hallway table, the teapot on the stove. She wandered like someone walking through a dream, pausing at the photo of my father still on the bookshelf. Her lip trembled. "You kept it," she whispered mostly to herself. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the envelope, the one with the printed documents and the letter on the table, in the living room and stepped out onto the porch, leaving her alone with it. I sat on the swing and listened. At first, only silence, then the rustle of paper, and then a sound that didn't belong to performance. A low, guttural sob as if something had torn inside her. Not the kind of cry designed to provoke pity, but the kind that came from realizing something you thought was gone had been preserved, not for you, but in spite of you. The breeze picked up, the lake shimmered in the late afternoon sun, and behind me her sobs broke into short, stuttering breaths, the kind you fight to contain when the truth won't let go. I didn't go back inside. Not yet. I needed her to sit with it, to read the words I had written, to see the evidence, to feel the quiet rage behind my restraint and the narrow thread of mercy my father had left for her. She had believed the house was gone, that she had erased it from my life with a single transaction. But what she didn't understand, what she never understood, was that this place wasn't just a structure. It was a line in the sand, and she had finally reached it. I waited until her sobs softened into silence. Then I stepped back inside. Elaine sat on the couch, her eyes red, the envelope still open in her lap. She didn't flinch when I entered, didn't wipe her tears, or pretend she hadn't just been broken open by truth. She looked up at me, not as a daughter, not as someone she could manipulate, But as someone she finally understood she could no longer lie to. I stood across from her steady. This house, I said quietly, is going to become a retreat. A place for women who were erased by people who said they loved them. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. I continued, it needs someone to care for it. Someone to clean the rooms, water the plants, restock the kitchen, keep it ready for whoever walks through the door next. I took a breath steady and sharp. You can stay, I said, not as my mother, but as the caretaker. Elaine didn't move. Her hands rested on the envelope, gripping its edges like it might anchor her to this moment. You won't own anything, I said. There will be no salary, just shelter, purpose, if you want it. The offer hung in the air, a thread between us. She blinked once, twice, then nodded. Just once. Not a plea, not a thank you. Just a nod. And then after a long pause, her voice returned. Soft, raspy, a whisper buried under decades of regret. Okay, she said, I'll stay. She looked down at the photo of my father on the bookshelf and added, so quiet I almost didn't hear, I'll take care of it, Con. The word pierced deeper than any apology could have. Con. She hadn't called me that since I was a child. Not baby, not sweetheart. Just Con, not to manipulate, not to guilt, just to acknowledge. I didn't reply. I walked to the window and opened it. The breeze rolled in fresh cold but not bitter. It smelled like pine and lake water and something else I couldn't quite name. Not forgiveness, not closure, but peace, hard-won, earned, unsaid. I turned back once, saw her still sitting there, eyes closed, breathing in the air, like it was the first clean breath she'd taken in years. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone fighting to be seen. I felt whole, on my own terms, in my own house, with my own name.